back to week 6 of the Great British Bake Off, and this week is pastry week, so let's dive in and see what we'll be making for this week's signature challenge.
Paul and Prue would like you each to make 2 batches of decorated Chouxnuts.
Okay, so I've never heard of Chouxnuts before, so this is going to be an interesting one. I can't wait to see what they turn out like and how they taste as well. So let's crack on with the process.
Now, your Chouxnuts need to be perfectly fried.
And either glazed or iced.
You have 2 hours.
On your marks,
And get set.
bake!
So before you start, make sure you cut some 12cm squares in parchment paper, and you want to draw a 7 to 8cm circle on it as well. We'll be using those as the template for our Chouxnuts later on. Now we're going to go ahead and make our choux pastry mix. And this is the first time I've ever done this, so it was a really great recipe for me to try. I'm starting off with a mix of plant-based milk and water. To that I'm adding some salt, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my plant-based butter. And the recipe, as always, will be in the description for this week's bake-along. And whilst that warms up, let's get some more information on Chouxnuts.
If you've never heard of a choux nut before, basically it's choux pastry piped into a donut shape. The choux nuts themselves are quite aerated. You want that beautiful aeration inside the choux nut.
And that's going to come to a boil over a medium heat. Stir it and make sure there's no lumps of your butter left in there. Then you're going to take it off of the heat and quickly add our mixture of flours to it. And you want to beat it really vigorously with a wooden spoon until the batter is nice and smooth. And you can see all that steam coming off it. You really want to give this a good beat to get any of the lumps of flour just to combine into that choux pastry mix. And then you want to pop it back on the heat, and it's going to go slightly glossy, and it will also come away from the side of the pan really easily as well. And that looks perfect. Next, you're going to put it into your stand mixer bowl, and I do recommend you use a stand mixer for the last part of making the choux pastry. It's going to be a lot easier for you. But first of all, we just want to let this sit and cool for 5 to 10 minutes. And let's see what advice Prue has for us on the consistency of the choux pastry.
Choux has to be exactly the right consistency, so getting the paste right is most important. If it's too wet, it's going to sink.
So as Prue has suggested, this is the part of making the Chouxnut where you're most likely to overdo the amount of moisture that you add to it. So what I've done, I've gone ahead and I've cracked my 3 eggs into my measuring jug, and then I'm just taking it a little bit at a time and adding it to the choux pastry because I want to make sure that it doesn't get too wet. If it runs too much off of your attachment when you check it, then it's gone too far and you would have to pretty much start again. I don't know enough about choux pastry to know if you can rectify it if it gets to that stage, but it's much better to just add a little bit at a time so that you wouldn't have to start again. And especially when the contestants are doing this in the bake-off tent, they often don't have time to start again either, so it's much better to do it a little bit at a time. You can see here that it is running off quite freely. It's not ribbony as it might be in some other recipes where you would be checking your batter consistency, but it does run a little bit. We want it to go a bit more though, so I've added a touch more egg. You can see there's still a little bit of egg left in my jug there, and I think this looks much better. What you want to make sure as well is because we're going to have to pipe this, you don't want to cause too much strain on your arm when you are piping. So I think we're going to leave it at this consistency. I'm just going to grab my spatula to scrape down the mixing attachment, and then we'll be able to go ahead and start bagging it up for piping as well. And then you just want to scrape down your bowl, make sure everything is nice and combined. It looks perfect. We're going to go ahead and bag it up. I'm just using a regular featherweight bag with a large star tip. This is a tip 4B, and I'll pop the link in the description for that so you can pick one of those up yourself. And then you're just going to go ahead, pop that bag in a large mason jar or a jug or a glass as I'm doing here, and then fill your bag. And the reason you want to use a large bag is because there is a lot of dough and you don't want to have to refill it part way through. To clean off your spatula, just close the bag on it, pull it up, and then you're not going to get any mess on your hands either.
Bakers, you have half an hour.
No pressure.
I'm sure it'll be fine. Just pipe in my choux dough nicely and gently.
Paul and Prue are expecting uniform shoe nuts,
I'm making sure the shape is as consistent as possible.
fried to perfection.
So let's get our shoe nuts piped. So I've got my parchment squares here. The circle is on the underside so that I'm not piping on the actual pencil. And then you're just holding it straight and going around in a circle. Now, one thing I did realize when I was doing these is I think my circles were actually a little bit too big, because you can see compared to the ones that the contestants had that you just saw, these seem a lot more open than theirs. But I'm going to carry on anyway, as this is my first time, and let's see how they turn out. So now we can go ahead and start frying them. So once our oil is at temperature, which is 180 degrees Celsius, you want to flip one upside down. I suggest you do one on its own first, just so that you can check everything is working okay for you. And then after a few seconds, you're going to take that parchment square off of it. And whilst that's continuing to fry, let's just talk about some safety tips here. You're obviously dealing with very hot oil, so you want to make sure that you've got everything accessible that you will need for this process. So you can see that I have a bowl that I'm putting my parchment squares in. I have a slotted spoon, some tongs, I have a cooling rack, and also some kitchen paper on it as well to soak up all of that oil. And you want to let them fry for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side until they're golden brown, and keep checking the temperature of your oil as well. As you're obviously adding new things into it, it will cool down slightly, so you may want to adjust it as you're going through this process. I also suggest not overloading your pan when you're doing this, because you don't want to cause anything to splutter and oil go everywhere, and obviously it's a burn hazard as well, so you want to be really careful when you're doing this. This one looks like it is almost done. It has puffed up nicely, but it is obviously a little bit smaller than we would like in relation to the ones that the bakers made in the tent. So I actually went ahead and piped an extra circle of our choux pastry onto the remaining ones. And as you can see, they are just a little bit fuller this time around. And I've put 2 in for this one. You can see that they're frying up nicely, and then I'm going to go ahead and just continue on through the process of peeling off that parchment paper, letting them fry for a couple of minutes, and then we'll turn them over and get them finished off. So as these finish off, you can see how much fuller they are in comparison to the first one. That extra bit of choux pastry has really made the difference.
Bakers, you have 15 minutes left.
That's exactly what I wanted to get. Seems to be a good golden color.
Shame about light colour, but never mind.
So here's the fun bit. Let's get our choux nuts finished off. For half of them, I'm actually going to coat them in a traditional cinnamon sugar that is really popular here in North America. You just want to add some white sugar to a bowl and then add as much cinnamon as you like. This is slightly under 1 teaspoon. Just give it a good stir together to make sure it's nice and combined. And then because these choux nuts were actually fried, they still have some oil on them, which means that that sugar is going to stick to them really, really nicely. I ended up with 10 donuts in total, so I'm going to do 5 in this flavor, and then I'm going to do something different with the remaining ones. And they look perfect. I love the size and shape of these and cannot wait to try them. So next we're going to make a glaze for this one, and I'm actually going to follow the recipe that Giuseppe used for his signature bake this week. We're starting off with some ice and sugar. To that I'm adding some honey and some caramel, and then we're just going to add some water to thin that down so we get a nice glaze. Now you want to make sure that you've sieved your ice and sugar so that you don't have any lumps in it, and then just use a spoon and bring all of that together. It takes a little bit of time, and I guess you could do this with a hand mixer if you preferred, but I find it's just easier to pop it in a bowl and mix it all by hand. It really does come together in no time at all. And of course you could add colour into this if you wanted to. You could do different flavours. Really the options are endless for something like this. Just do whatever you want to flavour that choux nut, because there is no actual sugar in them, so they're not sweet at all. It's the fillings and the glazes and toppings that you add to them that will actually give them some sweetness. So when you're dipping them, just push them around into that glaze, swirl them around a little bit, hold it up so that it drips off slightly, and then pop them on a plate to dry. They look great. It's slightly messy, yes, of course. I'm sure your kids would love to try this as well. It's always a fun thing to get them involved with baking, but it's a really nice and quick way to glaze and finish off your Chouxnuts. And there we go, there's our finished Chouxnuts for week 6 signature bake of the Bake Off.
Bakers, your time is up. Can you stop touching your nuts, please?
George,
I've eaten them, eating
don't
it.
touch any of your nuts.
Okay, so that's our Chouxnuts made. We're going to try one of them. I've decided to try the cinnamon sugar. So let's take a look. They're really nice and light and fluffy. Let's break it up so you guys can see inside. You can see it's got really nice texture in it, lots of air as well. Very nice and squidgy, just like the kind you'd have in a fair. Let's see what it tastes like. So it's really good. They're very different to regular baked donuts that I would usually make. I really like that nice light fluffiness in them as well. And with the cinnamon sugar, they are so, so good. So I hope you enjoyed watching this week's Signature Challenge. Next week is Caramel Week, which I'm really excited for because I love making dairy-free caramel. So make sure you check out my videos for that. Also subscribe to my channel as well, and don't forget to hit that bell so you get notifications of my next video. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.